The soft hum of my laptop filled the room as I reviewed a pile of reports from work. It was another late night, and the quiet in the house felt unusually oppressive. My wife, Erin, had left for her weekly book club meeting, a tradition she'd started about 6 months ago. Normally, I wouldn't think much of it, but tonight, something gnawed at me. The house felt too still. I glanced at the time on my phone, 9:47 p.m. Erin usually texted during these meetings, sending pictures of wine glasses or some amusing comment about her friends. But tonight, my phone was silent. I stared at the device for a moment, debating whether to text her. Maybe I was overthinking. She'd seemed distant lately, though I chalked it up to stress. We'd been married for 12 years, and while the spark wasn't what it once was, I'd always believed our bond was unshakable. But lately, something had changed. Erin had started taking extra care with her appearance, wearing dresses and makeup more often than usual. She'd also grown more protective of her phone, angling it away whenever I walked into the room. Then there were the sudden late nights at work and her newfound interest in staying fit. She'd even joined a yoga class downtown, which seemed odd for someone who once scoffed at exercise. My gut told me something wasn't right. Setting my laptop aside, I picked up my phone and texted her. "Hey, how's the book club?" 5 minutes passed. No response. I frowned, my unease deepening. Normally, Erin replied within moments. I decided to distract myself with work, but my focus was gone. I needed answers. An hour later, Erin returned home. The sound of her keys jangling in the lock made me tense. She stepped inside, her cheeks flushed, hair slightly disheveled. She held a bottle of red wine, a bright smile plastered on her face. "Hey, honey," she chirped, kicking off her heels. "Book club ran late. We got into this big discussion about the symbolism in The Great Gatsby. Can you believe Julia didn't think the green light meant hope?" I forced a smile. "Sounds intense." Erin placed the wine on the counter and approached me. She kissed my cheek, her perfume lingering in the air, a scent I didn't recognize. "I'm beat," she said, stretching her arms dramatically. "Going to shower and crash." I watched her walk upstairs, a nagging suspicion taking root in my chest. Something about her demeanor felt off. Too rehearsed, too perfect. And that unfamiliar perfume, it wasn't hers. As she disappeared into the bathroom, I found myself drawn to her purse. I hesitated, feeling a pang of guilt. But the doubts gnawed at me. I opened it. Inside, her phone lay tucked neatly in a side pocket. My hands trembled as I unlocked it. She'd shared her passcode years ago, back when trust wasn't a question. My stomach churned as I navigated to her messages. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Conversations with friends, colleagues, and family. But then I saw it, a text thread labeled Emma. That was strange. Erin didn't have a close friend named Emma. I opened it. The messages weren't from an Emma. They were from someone named Nathan. My heart sank as I read the texts. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible. Did you think of me today? I can't stop thinking about you. Still on for Saturday? Same hotel?" The texts blurred as my eyes filled with tears. My worst fears were confirmed. Erin was seeing someone else. The rest of the night passed in a haze. I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with questions. Who was Nathan? How long had this been going on? Did she love him? By morning, I resolved to confront her. But I needed proof, something undeniable. I couldn't risk her spinning this into some kind of misunderstanding. So, I hired a private investigator. The PI, a gruff man named Rick, was direct. "I'll get you answers," he promised. "But you need to be prepared for whatever I find. Affairs aren't always clean or simple." Over the next week, Rick sent me updates. Photos of Erin leaving work and meeting Nathan at a cozy cafe downtown. A video of them laughing together as they walked into a hotel. Each update was another dagger to the heart, but I couldn't stop. I needed to know everything. One night, Rick called me directly. "They've got plans this weekend," he said. A getaway at the Riverwood Inn. Room 218. My stomach turned. Erin had told me she was visiting her sister that weekend. The lies were unraveling fast. Saturday came, and Erin left with a suitcase, kissing me goodbye with an ease that chilled me to the bone. As soon as she drove off, I followed Rick's instructions and headed to the Riverwood Inn. Parking a few blocks away, I walked to the hotel and stationed myself near the lobby. My heart pounded as I waited. Then I saw them, Erin and Nathan, hand in hand, walking toward the elevators. She wore the dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to confront them right there. Rick had advised against it. Wait, he'd said. Confront her when you have the upper hand. I watched as the elevator doors closed, sealing them inside. My world shattered. I drove back home that night with a cocktail of emotions swirling inside me: rage, betrayal, sadness, and confusion. My marriage, the life I thought I'd built with Erin, was nothing more than a carefully maintained facade. Yet, I wasn't ready to act impulsively. Rick's words rang in my head. Wait. Be patient. Confront her when the pieces are in place. Patience wasn't my strong suit, but this time, I knew he was right. Sunday evening came, and Erin returned as though nothing had happened. She breezed into the house, smiling as she set her suitcase by the stairs. Hey, hon, she called out cheerfully. Miss me? I stood in the kitchen, pretending to read a newspaper. Of course, I said, forcing a smile. How was your sister's place? Her expression didn't falter. Erin was a practiced liar, it seemed. Oh, you know. Same old, same old. We binge-watched a terrible rom-com and ate too much ice cream. She paused, glancing at me. How was your weekend? Uneventful, I replied, my voice steady. Got some work done around the house. Nothing exciting. She nodded, already heading upstairs to unpack. I watched her go, my jaw clenched tightly. I'd never felt so disconnected from her, like I was looking at a stranger wearing my wife's face. The next morning, I met Rick at a small cafe across town. He laid out everything he'd uncovered on the table between us. Photos, receipts, even a copy of the hotel reservation. Room 218, just as he'd said. The name on the booking was Nathan Gray. She's been seeing him for at least 3 months, Rick said, his tone matter-of-fact. It's not just hotels either. They've had dinners, day trips, even a private yoga class. I swallowed hard, staring at the evidence. Each photo was a knife to the heart, but it was the text messages that broke me. Rick had found a way to pull Nathan's phone records. Their conversations were painfully intimate. You make me feel alive again. I wish I could wake up next to you every morning. One day, we won't have to hide. I forced myself to keep reading, my anger simmering beneath the surface. Rick leaned back in his chair, watching me. What's your next move? He asked. I took a deep breath. I want a divorce, I said firmly. But not before she understands what she's done. Rick nodded, his expression unreadable. You're not going to let her talk her way out of this, are you? Not a chance, I replied. I've been too trusting for too long. This ends on my terms. That night, I began laying the groundwork for my plan. Erin had no idea I knew about Nathan, and I intended to keep it that way, for now. Over dinner, she chatted about her day, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I played along, nodding and smiling at all the right moments. But inside, I was calculating every step. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with a divorce attorney. I needed to understand my options and how to protect myself financially. Erin and I had a joint bank account, but I also had a separate savings account she didn't know about. It was time to start thinking strategically. The attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Valerie, listened intently as I explained the situation. She didn't mince words. You're in a good position, she said, flipping through her notes. You've got evidence of infidelity, which will help in court if it comes to that. My advice? Start separating your finances immediately. Move your direct deposits to your private account. Keep copies of everything: bank statements, property records, even texts. I nodded, absorbing her advice. And what about the house? I asked. Valerie hesitated. That depends. If you want to stay, we can push for that in the settlement. But if she fights for it, you might have to compromise. I clenched my fists under the table. The house wasn't just a structure, it was our home, the place where I'd imagined building a future. The thought of losing it made my stomach turn. Over the next few weeks, I played the role of the clueless husband. Erin continued her charade, coming home late and texting Nathan under the guise of work or errands. I documented everything, compiling a dossier that left no room for doubt. Then, one evening, I decided to test her. Hey, I said casually as we sat down for dinner. I was thinking we should take a weekend trip. Just the two of us. Get away from the routine, you know? Erin froze for a split second, her fork hovering in midair. It was subtle, but I caught it. Oh, that sounds nice, she said, her tone light. When were you thinking? Next weekend, I replied. There's a cabin upstate I've been meaning to check out. Her smile faltered. Next weekend? I think I have something with the book club. I'll have to check. Of course, I said, forcing a smile. Let me know. She nodded, but her body language betrayed her unease. I knew exactly why. Next weekend was another rendezvous with Nathan. The following Friday, Erin left for what she claimed was a weekend retreat with her book club. I pretended to buy the lie, kissing her goodbye at the door. As soon as her car disappeared down the street, I sprang into action. I drove straight to the Riverwood Inn, parking in the same spot I'd used before. This time, I wasn't content to sit in the lobby and watch. I wanted to confront her. Rick had already confirmed their room number. I took the stairs to the second floor, my heart pounding with every step. When I reached room 218, I stood outside the door, listening. Laughter filtered through the thin walls, her laugh, carefree and full of joy. It was a sound I hadn't heard in months. I raised my hand to knock, then hesitated. This was the moment. Once I opened that door, there was no going back. But I had no intention of backing down. My hand hovered over the door to room 218, trembling with rage and anticipation. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, each one threatening to pull me in a different direction. But the laughter inside the room solidified my resolve. This wasn't the woman I thought I knew. This wasn't the Erin I married. I knocked 3 sharp raps. The laughter stopped abruptly. There was a pause, then the sound of muffled voices. My stomach churned as the seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. Finally, the door opened. Erin stood there, wrapped in a plush hotel robe, her hair damp as though she just stepped out of the shower. Her face turned pale the moment she saw me, her eyes widening in shock. Liam, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you doing here? I pushed past her without waiting for an invitation. Inside, the room reeked of cheap cologne and deceit. Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, hastily pulling on a shirt. His face contorted into a mix of confusion and guilt. So this is the book club? I said, my voice dripping with venom. Nice setup. Do you guys read before or after the showers? Erin stepped in front of me, her hands raised as if to ward off the storm she knew was coming. Liam, it's not what it looks like. Save it. I snapped, cutting her off. I've seen the pictures. I've read the texts. I know everything, Erin. Don't insult me by trying to spin this. Nathan stood up, his hands raised defensively. Look, man, I didn't know. Shut up. I snarled, my glare silencing him instantly. I'm not here to talk to you. Erin's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. Liam, please, let me explain. It was a mistake. A mistake? I echoed, my voice rising. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. This is deliberate. You lied to me, over and over, while sneaking around with him. Don't you dare call this a mistake. The dam inside me broke, and all the emotions I'd been bottling up poured out. Do you even realize what you've done? 12 years, Aaron? 12 years of marriage. Was any of it real, or were you just biding your time until someone like Nathan came along? Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't care. I turned to Nathan, who had started edging toward the door. And you? I said, my voice low and dangerous. You're the guy she's been throwing away her family for? What's your plan, huh? Play house with her until you get bored and move on to your next conquest? Nathan looked at Aaron, then back at me, before muttering, I didn't come here for this. And slipping out the door like the coward he was. For a moment, the room was silent except for Aaron's muffled sobs. I sank into the chair by the window, suddenly feeling the weight of it all. The anger gave way to exhaustion, leaving me hollow. Why, Aaron? I asked quietly, my voice barely audible. Why him? Why any of this? She sank to her knees, clutching the edge of the bed as she tried to gather herself. I don't know. She choked out. I was lonely. You've been so distant, so wrapped up in work. I felt invisible. Invisible? I repeated, my voice hardening again. Do you have any idea what I've been doing? Every late night, every extra hour, it was for us. For our future. And you repay me by sleeping with another man? She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I didn't mean for it to happen. It got out of control. Got out of control. I stood, my fury returning. You didn't trip and fall into an affair, Aaron. You made choices, deliberate, calculated choices. Don't stand there and pretend you're some victim of circumstance. Her sobs intensified, but I felt no sympathy. Do you even love him? I asked. No, she cried. It wasn't about love. It was a distraction. Something to fill the emptiness. I laughed bitterly. Congratulations, Aaron. You filled the emptiness all right. You also destroyed our marriage in the process. She crawled toward me, clutching at my legs. Please, Liam. Don't do this. Don't let this ruin us. I'll end it. I already ended it. We can fix this. I stepped back, her touch making my skin crawl. Fix this? I echoed. There's no fixing this, Aaron. You made your bed. Now you get to lie in it, alone. I turned and walked out, her sobs following me down the hall. Each step away from that room felt like shedding a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. The drive home was quiet, the gravity of the situation pressing down on me. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I knew what I had to do. I spent the night packing a bag. The house felt cold and lifeless, stripped of the warmth it once held. I moved into the guest room, leaving Aaron to the silence of our bedroom. The next morning, I called Valerie, my attorney. I'm ready, I told her. File the papers. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into preparing for the inevitable legal battle. Aaron tried to apologize, tried to make amends, but I couldn't bring myself to trust her again. The woman I'd loved was gone, replaced by a stranger I couldn't recognize. As I sat in the attorney's office, signing the final documents, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. This wasn't how I'd envisioned my life, but it was the path I had to take. I walked out of that office with my head held high, determined to rebuild my life from the ashes of what Aaron had destroyed. The day after I signed the divorce papers, a strange sense of calm washed over me. It wasn't peace, exactly. More like the numbness that comes after a storm. The turbulence of discovering Aaron's affair, the heartbreak of confronting her, and the gut-wrenching decision to end our marriage had left me drained. But now, there was no more indecision, no more guessing. The path ahead, though painful, was clear. That morning, Aaron texted me. Can we talk? Please. I stared at the screen for a long moment before locking my phone and tossing it onto the kitchen counter. There was nothing left to say. Every word she'd spoken after the confrontation had been an attempt to rewrite the narrative, to twist her betrayal into something she could rationalize. I wasn't interested in hearing it anymore. Over the next few weeks, I focused on rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy. Everywhere I turned, there were reminders of her. The scent of her perfume lingered in the closet. The mug she used every morning sat untouched on the counter. Even the smallest objects, a hair tie, a book on the coffee table, felt like tiny needles in my heart. I decided it was time to purge. One Saturday, I went through the house, methodically packing up everything that reminded me of her. Clothes, photos, mementos from vacations. We built a life together, and now I had to dismantle it piece by piece. I piled the boxes in the garage, unsure of what I'd do with them. Sell them? Burn them? Donate them? I didn't care. I just needed them out of sight. As I worked, I stumbled across a photo album tucked away in the back of a drawer. It was from our honeymoon, the pages filled with smiling photos of a time when we were genuinely happy. I stared at one picture in particular, Erin and I sitting on a beach, the sunset painting the sky behind us. Her head rested on my shoulder, and my arm was wrapped around her waist. We looked so in love, so certain of our future. I slammed the album shut and shoved it into a box. That future was gone. Friends and family started reaching out once word of the divorce spread. My sister, Emily, called first. "Liam, I just heard." "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "I'm fine," I lied. "Better than I've been in weeks." Emily wasn't convinced. "You don't have to pretend with me. Do you want to come over for dinner? The kids would love to see you." I hesitated. I'd been isolating myself since the split, avoiding people who cared about me. But maybe it was time to change that. "Yeah," I said finally. "I'd like that." Dinner at Emily's house was chaotic but comforting. Her kids ran circles around the dining room table, laughing and shouting while we tried to eat. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of normalcy. Emily's husband, Mark, handed me a beer and patted my shoulder. "You'll get through this," he said simply. "It sucks now, but it'll get better. Trust me." I nodded, grateful for his support, even if I wasn't entirely sure I believed him. Returning home that night, the silence felt less oppressive. Emily's family reminded me of what I still had, a network of people who cared about me, who wanted to see me move forward. I resolved to stop wallowing in my grief and start focusing on the future. Step 1. Rejoin the living. I reached out to my old college buddy Dave, who'd been inviting me to poker nights for years. "Still got room for one more?" I texted. "Hell yeah," he replied almost instantly. "Be here Friday. Bears on me." Poker night turned out to be exactly what I needed. Sitting around a table with old friends, joking and laughing, I felt like myself again. For a few hours, I wasn't the guy whose wife had cheated on him. I was just Liam, the guy who could bluff his way to a winning hand. As the night wore on and the beer flowed, Dave pulled me aside. "You know," he said, his voice low, "if you ever want to get back out there, my sister's single. She's been asking about you." I laughed, shaking my head. "Not ready for that yet, man." "No pressure," he said, clapping me on the back. "But when you are, let me know." The weeks turned into months, and gradually, I began to feel more like myself. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to keep my mind busy. I started hitting the gym again, channeling my anger and frustration into something productive. Slowly but surely, I was rebuilding. Erin tried to reach out a few more times, sending long-winded emails about how sorry she was, how much she regretted everything. I didn't respond. Let her live with her guilt. I had no intention of carrying it for her. One day, I ran into Rick, the private investigator, at a coffee shop. He gave me a nod and a rare smile. "How's life treating you?" he asked. "Better," I admitted. "Thanks to you?" He shrugged. "Just doing my job. You're the one who decided to take control." As I left the coffee shop, I realized he was right. I'd spent so much time feeling like a victim, but now, I was taking my life back. Erin's betrayal didn't define me. It was a chapter in my story, not the whole book. One evening, while cleaning out the garage, I found the box of Erin's things. I'd forgotten about it in the chaos of rebuilding my life. For a moment, I considered opening it, but then I thought better of it. Instead, I drove to the nearest donation center and dropped it off without a second thought. It was time to let go. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I was ready to move forward, to see what life had in store for me. The crisp autumn air nipped at my face as I stepped outside one morning, coffee in hand. The leaves had turned vibrant shades of orange and red, a stark contrast to the gray monotony I'd been living in just a few months ago. Somehow, the changing season felt symbolic, a signal that it was time to embrace the next chapter of my life. I'd come a long way since the divorce. The paperwork was finalized, the house was officially mine, and I'd settled into a new rhythm. It wasn't easy, but the ache in my chest was no longer unbearable. Slowly, I was learning to appreciate my independence. One day, as I was scrolling through social media, I noticed a post from Dave. He'd tagged a group of us from college, announcing a weekend cabin trip. "Guys' weekend, no excuses," the post read. I hesitated for a moment. My first instinct was to decline. Social outings still felt like uncharted territory. But then I remembered my vow to stop hiding from life. "Count me in," I replied. The cabin trip turned out to be exactly what I needed. A handful of us gathered in the mountains, spending the weekend hiking, grilling, and playing cards by the fire. For the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed without reservation. The weight I'd been carrying seemed to lift with every mile I put between myself and the city. On the last night, as we sat around the fire, Dave brought up his sister again. "You know, Liam," he said, smirking over his beer, "Lila's still single. And she keeps asking about you." The group erupted into good-natured teasing, but I waved it off. "Not my scene right now," I said, though I couldn't help but feel a small flicker of curiosity. The following week, I bumped into Lila by chance. She was picking up takeout at the same restaurant where I'd stopped for lunch. I hadn't seen her in years, but she hadn't changed much. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her easy smile was as genuine as I remembered. "Liam?" she said, her eyes lighting up with recognition. "It's been ages." We chatted for a few minutes, catching up on life. She mentioned her work as a graphic designer, and her recent move back to the city after a bad breakup. I told her about the divorce, feeling surprisingly comfortable opening up to her. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, her expression softening. "But I'm glad you're doing okay." As we parted ways, she handed me her business card. "In case you ever need someone to talk to," she said with a wink. That evening, I found myself staring at her card, debating whether to text her. It felt too soon, but something about her stuck with me. Lila wasn't just someone to pass the time with, she was someone who understood what it meant to start over. After a long internal debate, I typed out a message. "Hey Lila. It was nice running into you today. Let me know if you'd like to grab a coffee sometime." She replied almost instantly. "I'd love that. How about this weekend?" We met at a small cafe downtown, one I hadn't been to in years. Lila was waiting for me at a corner table, a warm smile on her face. Over coffee, we talked for hours, about work, life, and the challenges of rebuilding after heartbreak. There was no pressure, no expectations. Just two people sharing their stories. "I'm not sure I'm ready for anything serious," I admitted at one point. "Things are still raw." Lila nodded. "I get it. Honestly, I'm in the same boat. But sometimes it's nice to have someone to talk to who gets it." By the time we parted ways, I felt a strange sense of hope. I wasn't sure where this was going, but for the first time, I didn't feel stuck in the past. Lila wasn't Erin, and that was the point. She represented a fresh start. Over the next few weeks, Lila and I continued to see each other casually. We kept things light, movie nights, walks in the park, dinners at low-key restaurants. She became a confidant, someone I could share my thoughts with without fear of judgment. One evening, as we walked through the city's holiday market, she slipped her arm through mine. It was a simple gesture, but it sent a ripple of warmth through me. "Liam," she said softly, "you're a good man. Don't let what happened make you forget that." Her words stayed with me long after that night. Meanwhile, life at work was picking up. I landed a big promotion, one that came with more responsibilities but also more opportunities. My boss, James, pulled me aside after a meeting. "You've been through a lot this year," he said. "But I have to say, you're coming out stronger. Keep it up." I thanked him, feeling a spark of pride. For so long, I'd let Erin's betrayal define me. But now, I was reclaiming my narrative. By the time spring rolled around, I realized I hadn't thought about Erin in weeks. The anger and sadness that once consumed me had faded, replaced by a quiet determination to move forward. Lila and I remained close, though we hadn't defined what we were. It didn't matter. She was helping me heal, one conversation, one laugh at a time. One sunny afternoon, I found myself at the park, watching families play and couples stroll hand in hand. For the first time in months, I felt content. Not just okay, but genuinely happy. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. "Ice cream? My treat." I smiled, tucking my phone back into my pocket. Life wasn't perfect, but it was moving forward. And for now, that was enough. As summer approached, I felt like I'd finally found my footing. My days were filled with work, casual evenings with Lila, and long weekends spent rediscovering hobbies I'd abandoned during my marriage: hiking, photography, and even dabbling in woodworking. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. Then, one afternoon, as I left work, my phone buzzed with a familiar name I hadn't seen in months: Erin. I froze. Her name on my screen sent a jolt through me, like a ghost rising from the past. My first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. Against my better judgment, I swiped to answer. "Hello?" I said cautiously. "Liam." Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you." I stayed silent, waiting for her to explain. "It's about the house," she continued. "I got a letter from the county. Something about unpaid property taxes from before the divorce. Can we meet to go over it?" Her words hit me like a bucket of cold water. I thought I'd severed all ties with her, but the tangled mess of shared finances had found a way to resurface. I sighed. "Fine. When and where?" We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop near my office. I spent the evening steeling myself, determined not to let her presence rattle me. She'd made her choices, and I wasn't about to let her drag me back into her chaos. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a corner table. She looked different, thinner, her once vibrant energy subdued. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down. "I wasn't sure if you'd agree." "What's this about, Erin?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. She handed me a letter from the county, detailing overdue property taxes on the house. My stomach sank as I read it. The missed payments dated back to the last year of our marriage, a time when I'd assumed she was handling the finances while I focused on work. "This doesn't surprise me," I said flatly. "You always were good at sweeping things under the rug." Her face crumpled, and for a moment she looked like she was about to cry. "Liam, I'm sorry. For everything." I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to lash out. I didn't want her apologies. They were too little, too late. "What do you want from me, Erin?" I asked, my voice cold. "I'll deal with the taxes. But if you're looking for forgiveness, you won't find it here." She looked down at her hands, twisting a napkin nervously. "I don't expect forgiveness. I wanted you to know I regret everything. Losing you was the worst mistake of my life." Her words might have moved me months ago, but now they felt hollow. I didn't need her regret. I needed closure. "I appreciate you saying that," I said, though I didn't mean it. "But it doesn't change anything." Erin nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know." The meeting left me shaken, but it also reinforced how far I'd come. Erin's remorse, while genuine, wasn't my burden to carry. I built a new life, one that didn't revolve around her, and I wasn't about to let her unravel it. That evening, I told Lila about the encounter. We sat on her apartment balcony, the city lights twinkling below us. "How do you feel about it?" she asked, her tone gentle. "Honestly? Relieved," I admitted. Seeing her again made me realize how much better off I am without her. Lila smiled, her hand resting on mine. "That's a big step, Liam. You're letting go." A few weeks later, the property tax issue was resolved, and Erin faded from my life once more. But her brief return left me with a renewed sense of purpose. I was ready to move forward, not just away from the past, but towards something new. One Friday evening, Lila and I went to a local art gallery opening. She loved art, and though it wasn't my usual scene, I enjoyed seeing her so animated. As we wandered through the exhibits, she stopped in front of a striking abstract painting. "What do you think it means?" she asked, tilting her head. I studied the painting for a moment. "Chaos, maybe? But also possibility." She laughed. "That's deep, Liam. I like it." As we moved to the next piece, I realized how comfortable I felt around her. There were no pretenses, no pressure. Just an easy companionship that felt like a balm to my soul. That night, as I walked her home, Lila stopped suddenly and turned to me. "Liam, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said. "Do you ever think about what's next? For us, I mean." I hesitated, caught off guard by the question. I'd been so focused on healing that I hadn't considered what the future might hold. "I do," I admitted. "And I think I'm finally ready to take that step." Her eyes searched mine, a smile slowly spreading across her face. "Good," she said. "Because I think I'm ready too." The road to rebuilding my life had been long and painful, but as I stood there with Lila, the pieces finally felt like they were falling into place. Erin's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but it had also forced me to find strength I didn't know I had. And now, for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the future, with Lila by my side. The months that followed felt like the start of something entirely new. My days were no longer about just surviving, I was beginning to thrive. Lila and I grew closer, our relationship deepening with each passing week. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something meaningful. But new beginnings weren't without challenges. One Friday evening, after work, Lila invited me to her sister's birthday dinner. I hesitated, knowing it would mean meeting more of her family. It was a step I hadn't taken with anyone since Erin, and part of me wondered if I was ready. "You'll love them," Lila said, sensing my hesitation. "And they'll love you." I smiled, trying to match her confidence. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it." The dinner was held at a cozy Italian restaurant downtown. Lila's sister, Kate, greeted me warmly, her bubbly personality immediately putting me at ease. Over the course of the evening, I found myself laughing and swapping stories with her family, feeling more comfortable than I'd expected. At one point, Kate pulled Lila aside, glancing over at me with a mischievous smile. I couldn't hear their conversation, but Lila's blushing cheeks told me everything I needed to know. On the way home, I asked, "What was that about?" Lila grinned, shaking her head. "Kate was just being nosy. She wanted to know if you're the one." I raised an eyebrow. "And what did you tell her?" Her smile softened. "I told her you might be." Lila's words lingered in my mind over the next few days. I'd been so focused on taking things slow, but now I realized how much she meant to me. For the first time, I considered the possibility of a future with her, not just a casual relationship, but something lasting. But as I began to entertain that idea, the shadows of my past crept in. One afternoon, while cleaning out the garage, I stumbled across a box I'd missed during my earlier purge. It was filled with old photos, including an album from my wedding to Erin. My first instinct was to toss it, but curiosity got the better of me. Flipping through the album, I was struck by how happy we'd looked. In one photo, Erin was laughing, her arms wrapped around my neck as we danced. In another, we stood on the steps of the church, beaming as confetti rained down on us. At the time, I'd thought those moments would last forever. The memories stung, but they also reminded me of how far I'd come. That chapter of my life was over, and it no longer defined me. I closed the album and set it aside, ready to move forward. That evening, I met Lila at a small wine bar near her apartment. She could tell something was on my mind. "You okay?" she asked, her hand resting on mine. I nodded. "Yeah. Just thinking about how much has changed in the past year." She studied me for a moment, then said, "You've come a long way, Liam. And you're stronger than you give yourself credit for." Her words warmed me, and I realized how much I valued her presence in my life. She wasn't just a distraction from my pain, she was someone I could see myself building a future with. A few weeks later, I decided to take a leap of faith. I planned a weekend getaway to a cabin in the mountains, the same one I'd mentioned to Erin months ago. But this time, I wasn't going alone. Lila was thrilled when I told her about the trip. "I've been dying to get out of the city," she said, her excitement contagious. "This is perfect." We arrived on a crisp Saturday morning, the cabin nestled in a clearing surrounded by towering pine trees. The air was fresh and cool, and the view of the nearby lake was breathtaking. As we unpacked, I caught myself watching Lila as she moved around the cabin, her laughter filling the space. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. This was what I'd been searching for, not perfection, but connection. That evening, we sat by the fire, sipping wine as the flames crackled. The conversation turned to the future, and Lila asked, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" The question caught me off guard. For so long, I hadn't allowed myself to think that far ahead. But now, I realized I had an answer. "Happy," I said simply. "Wherever that is, as long as I'm happy." Lila smiled, her eyes shining. "I think you're on the right track." The trip solidified what I'd already begun to suspect. I was falling for Lila. But this time, it didn't scare me. I was ready to open my heart again, knowing I was stronger for having survived the pain of my past. When we returned to the city, I took the next step in letting go of Erin's hold on my life. I donated the wedding album I'd found, along with the last remnants of our shared belongings. It felt symbolic, a final farewell to a chapter that no longer served me. With Lila by my side, I was ready to write the next chapter, one built on trust, respect, and genuine connection. Things with Lila were going better than I could have ever imagined. Over the next few months, we grew closer, sharing parts of ourselves we hadn't revealed to anyone else. Her laughter filled the spaces in my life that had once felt empty, and for the first time since the divorce, I dared to believe I'd found someone I could trust again. But trust, I was beginning to learn, could be a fragile illusion. One evening, as Lila and I relaxed on my couch, her phone buzzed repeatedly. She'd been getting more messages than usual lately, often stepping away to answer them. I didn't think much of it at first, she had a busy career, after all. But tonight, she seemed particularly jumpy. "Everything okay?" I asked as she glanced at her phone. "Yeah, just work stuff," she said quickly, locking the screen and setting the phone face down on the coffee table. I nodded, but a flicker of unease wormed its way into my mind. Something about her reaction didn't sit right. I tried to push the thought away, reminding myself that I wasn't Erin's husband anymore. I couldn't let my past ruin what I had with Lila. Still, that night, as she slept beside me, I couldn't help but notice how tightly she clutched her phone, even in her sleep. The doubts grew over the next few weeks. Lila started canceling plans at the last minute, citing work deadlines or family emergencies. She seemed distracted, her laughter less frequent, her touch less certain. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that relationships had their ups and downs. But one Friday evening, everything came crashing down. I was leaving the office late, my mind preoccupied with an upcoming presentation, when I saw her. Lila was sitting in the corner booth of a cozy bistro across the street, laughing with a man I didn't recognize. Her hand rested lightly on his arm as he leaned in, speaking with an intimacy that turned my stomach. I froze, watching from a distance as they talked, their body language unmistakable. It was too familiar, too close. My mind raced, every rational explanation I tried to summon crumbling under the weight of what I was seeing. Without thinking, I crossed the street and walked into the bistro. Lila's laughter died as she spotted me approaching, her face going pale. "Liam!" she exclaimed, her voice laced with panic. "What are you doing here?" "I was about to ask you the same thing," I said, my voice tight. The man turned to me, his expression a mix of confusion and irritation. "Lila, who is this?" he asked. I turned to him, my anger boiling over. "I'm her boyfriend." "Who the hell are you?" His eyes widened, and he looked at Lila, who was already scrambling to her feet. "Liam, I can explain," she began, her voice trembling. "I'd love to hear it," I said, folding my arms. "Go ahead." She glanced at the man, who quickly grabbed his coat and muttered, "I'm out of here." He bolted, leaving the two of us standing in the middle of the bistro, every eye in the room on us. Back at my apartment, the confrontation continued. Lila sat on the couch, her hands trembling as she tried to explain. "It wasn't what it looked like," she said, her voice desperate. "He's just a friend. We were catching up." "Don't insult my intelligence," I snapped, cutting her off. "I've seen that look before. I know what it means." Tears streamed down her face, but I felt nothing but cold fury. "How long?" I demanded. "How long have you been seeing him?" "It wasn't serious," she insisted. It happened a couple of times, and I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to lose you." "Well, congratulations," I said bitterly. "You've managed to do exactly that." She left that night, taking her things and leaving me alone in the apartment that suddenly felt too big, too empty. I sat in silence, staring at the walls, wondering how I could have been so stupid. How could I have let myself trust again, only to be betrayed a second time? In the days that followed, I replayed every moment with Lila, looking for signs I'd missed. The long texts, the late cancellations, the distracted looks, it was all there, just like it had been with Aaron. I'd ignored the warning signs, convinced myself that this time would be different. But it wasn't. And the betrayal cut just as deep. One night, as I nursed a glass of whiskey, Rick's words echoed in my mind. "You need to be prepared for whatever I find." He'd been talking about Aaron, but the sentiment applied just as much to Lila. I hadn't been prepared, not this time. But I would be now. The next morning I called Rick. "Liam," he said, surprised to hear from me. "What's going on?" "I need your help again," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done being blindsided. I need to know who I can trust." Rick hesitated. "You sure you want to go down this road again?" "Absolutely," I replied. "I've been burned twice, Rick. Never again." Over the next few weeks, I focused on myself. I threw myself into work, spent more time with family, and started picking up new hobbies to distract myself from the pain. But I also kept Rick on retainer, determined never to be caught off guard again. Trust, I realized, wasn't something I could afford to give freely anymore. If I was going to rebuild my life again, I'd have to do it on my own terms, and with my eyes wide open. In the days following Lila's departure, I expected to feel the same hollow emptiness that had consumed me after Aaron's betrayal. But this time, the emotions were different. Anger, sharp and unrelenting, had taken center stage. I wasn't sad, I was furious. Furious at her, furious at myself, and furious at the cycle I seemed unable to escape. But something about this betrayal felt unfinished. A week after the bistro confrontation, Rick called. "Liam," he said, his tone uncharacteristically cautious. "I dug into Lila like you asked? You might want to sit down for this." "Just tell me," I said, bracing myself for whatever was coming. "There's more to her story than you know," Rick began. "The guy you saw her with, his name is Owen Shaw. He's not just some random fling. They'd been together for years, on and off, long before you ever came into the picture." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Years? I echoed. What the hell does that mean? She's been playing both sides, Rick explained. I found messages between them that go back nearly a decade. She disappears for a while, he takes her back, and then she vanishes again. My guess? She thrives on the chaos. My head spun as Rick continued. Here's the kicker, Owen didn't bolt from that bistro out of guilt. He was furious. He thought you were the one she was cheating with. The pieces started falling into place, each revelation sharpening my anger. Lila hadn't just lied to me, she'd constructed an elaborate web of deceit, using me as a pawn in her sick game with Owen. The following evening, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Lila had wormed her way into my life, into my heart, while juggling another relationship all along. I'd been so blind, so desperate to believe in her, that I'd missed all the signs. I poured myself another drink, debating what to do. Part of me wanted to let it go, to cut her out of my life and move on. But another part, a louder, angrier part, demanded answers. I couldn't let her walk away without facing the damage she'd done. I picked up my phone and texted her. We need to talk. To my surprise, Lila replied almost immediately. Okay. Name the time and place. We agreed to meet at the park where we often walked together. I chose the location deliberately, neutral ground, but one that would remind her of everything she'd thrown away. When she arrived, she looked nervous, her usual confidence replaced with uncertainty. She sat on the bench beside me, folding her hands in her lap. What's this about, Liam? She asked softly. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I know about Owen, I said bluntly. All of it. Her face went pale, and for a moment she looked like a deer caught in headlights. But then she composed herself, forcing a laugh. Owen? Liam, he's just a friend. Don't, I interrupted, my voice low and firm. Don't lie to me. I've seen the messages. I know how long this has been going on. Her shoulders slumped, the facade crumbling. I didn't mean for you to find out like this, she murmured. It's complicated. Complicated? I repeated, my voice rising. You lied to me, Lila. You played me. And for what? Some sick thrill? To keep your options open? Tears welled in her eyes, but I refused to feel sympathy. It wasn't like that, she insisted. Owen and I have history. It's messy. But I care about you, Liam. I really do. Care? I snapped. You don't even know the meaning of the word. If you cared, you wouldn't have dragged me into your circus. You used me, Lila. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Please, Liam, she begged. I was trying to figure things out. I didn't want to lose you. You already have, I said coldly. Whatever we had is gone. And honestly, I'm not sure it was ever real. After she left, I sat on the bench for a long time, staring at the empty path ahead of me. The anger hadn't subsided, but something else had taken its place, resolve. This was it. The last time I'd let someone manipulate me, lie to me, and make me doubt myself. Aaron and Lila had both taught me painful lessons, but I wasn't the same person I'd been back then. I was stronger now. Wiser. As I walked back to my car, I made a decision, no more looking back. It was time to move forward, to rebuild my life on my terms, without the ghosts of betrayal haunting my every step. That night, I called Rick again. Thanks for everything, I told him. I won't need your services anymore. You sure? He asked. People like Lila and Aaron tend to leave scars. I'm sure, I said. It's time to let go. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into creating a life that was truly mine. I started volunteering at a local youth center, helping mentor kids who needed guidance. I joined a hiking club, reconnecting with my love for the outdoors. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was searching for someone to complete me. I was enough. The days turned into weeks, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly in control of my life. The sting of Lila's betrayal had dulled, replaced by a quiet determination to focus on myself. My routines became my refuge: early mornings at the gym, long hours at work, and evenings spent exploring new hobbies. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. But life, I was beginning to understand, had a way of testing even the strongest foundations. It started innocuously enough: an invitation to my boss's anniversary party. James and his wife, Karen, were celebrating 20 years of marriage, and they were hosting a lavish event at a swanky downtown venue. I wasn't thrilled about attending. I still wasn't ready to dive back into socializing, but James had been a solid supporter during my divorce, and I felt obligated to go. The evening was elegant, the kind of affair where champagne flowed freely and laughter echoed through the room. I stuck to the edges of the crowd, nursing a drink and making polite conversation with colleagues. Then I saw her. She was standing near the bar, wearing a sleek black dress that hugged her figure in all the right ways. Her auburn hair was swept into a loose bun, and her laughter floated above the noise of the crowd. I didn't recognize her, but something about her presence drew me in. Our eyes met, and she smiled, a genuine, warm smile that caught me off guard. Before I could think twice, she was walking toward me. "Hi," she said, her voice smooth and confident. "I don't think we've met. I'm Harper." "Liam," I replied, shaking her hand. "You with the company?" She laughed. "No, I'm Karen's cousin. She insisted I come, even though I hardly know anyone here." "Well, now you know me," I said, surprising myself with how easily the words came. We spent the rest of the evening talking. Harper was sharp, witty, and refreshingly straightforward, a stark contrast to the guarded, manipulative women I'd encountered before. She wasn't trying to impress me or play games. She was just herself. By the end of the night, she had my number, and I had hers. Harper and I started seeing each other casually, meeting for coffee or dinner whenever our schedules allowed. I was cautious at first, hesitant to let my guard down. But Harper was patient, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. Slowly, I began to trust her. One evening, as we walked through the park, she asked me about my past. "I've noticed you're careful," she said gently. "Like you're afraid to let anyone in. What happened, Liam?" I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. But something about Harper made me want to be honest. "I've been burned," I admitted. "Twice. My ex-wife, and then someone I thought I could trust after her. It's hard to let go of that." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That kind of betrayal leaves a mark. But it doesn't have to define you." "I'm trying," I said. "It's just hard." Harper stopped walking and turned to face me. "Liam, I'm not here to fix you. I'm not here to be your savior or your escape. I'm just here. And if you want to take this slow, that's okay. I'm not going anywhere." Her words hit me like a bomb, soothing wounds I hadn't realized were still raw. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Our relationship grew naturally, without the drama or complications I'd come to associate with love. Harper was steady, grounded, and fiercely independent. She didn't need me, but she wanted me, a distinction that made all the difference. One evening, as we cooked dinner together in my kitchen, Harper paused, holding a bottle of wine in her hand. "You know," she said, her tone light, "I never thought I'd meet someone like you." "Someone like me?" I teased. "What does that mean?" She smiled. "Someone who's been through hell and still comes out kind. You've got every reason to be bitter, but you're not. That's rare." I didn't know how to respond, so I kissed her instead. But life, as I'd learned, rarely allowed happiness to come without challenges. A month into our relationship, Harper dropped a bombshell. We were sitting on her couch, watching a movie, when she turned to me, her expression serious. "Liam, there's something I need to tell you," she said. I tensed, bracing myself. "Okay. What is it?" She took a deep breath. "I was married once. It ended badly. He cheated on me." Her confession caught me off guard. "I'm sorry," I said, unsure of what else to say. She nodded. "It's been years, but I still carry it with me. And I just thought you should know. I don't want there to be any secrets between us. Her honesty was disarming, and it deepened my respect for her. Thank you for telling me, I said. I'm glad you trust me enough to share that. She smiled, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, doubt, fear, or maybe both. I realized then that we were more alike than I'd thought, two people trying to rebuild after being broken. As Harper and I navigated the fragile beginnings of our relationship, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, was lurking in the background. My past had a way of resurfacing when I least expected it, and I couldn't help but wonder if hers might do the same. Harper and I were happy. At least, that's what I told myself. Our relationship was steady, full of trust and understanding, and she seemed like the first truly honest person I'd been with in years. But life had taught me to be cautious. No one was without their secrets, and I'd learned the hard way that even the most sincere smiles could hide a knife. It started with a voicemail. I was leaving work one evening when my phone buzzed. A notification from an unknown number flashed on the screen. Normally I'd ignore it, but something compelled me to listen. Liam, the voice said, low and hesitant. You don't know me, but you need to know the truth about Harper. She's not who you think she is. My blood ran cold as the message ended. There was no callback number, no explanation. Just that cryptic, ominous warning. That night, as Harper and I sat on my couch, sharing a bottle of wine, I couldn't shake the message from my mind. I watched her laugh at something on the TV, her eyes sparkling, and a part of me screamed that this couldn't be real. She couldn't be like Erin or Lila. Not her. But doubt had already planted its seed. The next day, I called Rick. I need one more favor, I said, my voice strained. Can you dig into Harper? Quietly. Rick sighed on the other end of the line. Liam, are you sure about this? You're playing with fire. Just do it, I insisted. I need to know. The following week was agony. Harper and I spent time together as usual, but every touch, every glance, felt like a test. Was she hiding something? Or was I sabotaging the best thing to happen to me in years? Finally, Rick called. Liam, he began, his tone heavy. I've got something. My stomach churned. What is it? Harper's ex-husband, Rick explained. He's been reaching out to people connected to her, claiming she's dangerous, manipulative. But here's the thing, he's the one who's lying. What? I asked, confused. I found court records, Rick continued. She didn't just divorce him. She filed a restraining order. He was abusive, controlling, and cheated on her repeatedly. Everything he's doing now is part of a pattern, smear campaigns, trying to ruin her reputation. I sank into my chair, the weight of relief and guilt crashing over me. So, she's telling the truth? Yes, Rick confirmed. And Liam? You need to tell her about this. She deserves to know. That evening, I invited Harper over. She arrived with her usual warmth, but I could see the worry etched in her features. What's wrong? She asked as we sat down. I took a deep breath. Harper, someone's been trying to contact me about you. Your ex-husband. Her face fell, and for a moment, I thought she might crumble. But then she straightened her shoulders, her jaw tightening. What did he say? That you're not who you claim to be, I admitted. But I had it checked out. Rick found the truth. I know what he did to you. Tears welled in her eyes, and she looked away, her voice trembling. I was hoping he'd leave me alone. He's been doing this for years, spreading lies, trying to turn people against me. I'm sorry, I said softly. I should have trusted you. I let my past cloud my judgment. Harper reached for my hand, her grip firm despite the tears streaking her face. Liam, I get it. You've been hurt, and you were scared. But I'm not Erin, and I'm not Lila. I'm me. And I'm here. Her words hit me like a wave, washing away the last remnants of doubt. I know, I said, squeezing her hand. And I'm done looking over my shoulder. From that moment on, things between us changed. We grew stronger, our bond solidified by the trials we both endured. Harper wasn't my escape or my salvation, she was my partner, someone who understood my scars because she bore her own. Months later, as we walked hand in hand through the park, I stopped and turned to her. "Harper," I said, my heart pounding, "I need to ask you something." She smiled, her eyes sparkling. "What is it?" I took a deep breath and reached into my pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "Will you marry me?" Her hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times yes." The road to that moment hadn't been easy. It was filled with heartbreak, betrayal, and hard lessons. But it led me to Harper, and for that, I was grateful. This time, I knew it was real. This time, I was finally home.